Today on Variant, I'm covering the history of X-23, just in time for the Logan movie. Welcome to Variant, where we love comics more than I'd like to see Tom Hardy become the new Wolverine. I'm your host, Arris Quinones. As we all know, X-23 is making her live-action debut tomorrow night with the release of Logan. And as usual, every time a new character hits the big screen, I'm here to break down their comic book history. Also, in case you were wondering, we released the History of Wolverine episode a while back. You can check it out by clicking here, if you haven't seen it already. But as for today's episode, it's all about Wolverine's clone, X-23. X-23 was created by writer Craig Kyle and actually made her first appearance in Season 3 of Episode 10 of the X-Men Evolution cartoon. She was so well received by fans that Marvel decided to bring her into their comic book continuity. Much like DC did with Harley Quinn after she first appeared in Batman the Animated Series before making her way into the comics. Anyway, Craig Kyle created X-23 as an attempt to make Wolverine that was relatable to young kids, as the original Wolverine was older and more rugged. The X-Men Evolution cartoon as a whole was a reinvention of the normal X-Men, as it depicted all the characters as teenagers rather than adults. Kyle stated that X-23 is the Pinocchio of Marvel Comics, referring to her as a samurai sword / weapon that turns into a real girl. Which is actually a really cool analogy for the character. She starts as a crazy little murderous assassin, but slowly learns to become more human. Well, as human as any highly trained mutant assassin can be. As for X-23's comic book debut, she first appeared on the pages of a comic in NYX issue 3 in February of 2004. And we get her comic book origin in the story X-23 Innocence Lost. It goes something like this. Ever since Logan escaped from the Weapon X program all those years ago, the organization known as the Facility was trying to recreate what they did with him. But as much as they tried, they just couldn't do it, so they finally gave up and hired renowned geneticist Sarah Kinney. Kinney had convinced them that she could recreate Wolverine through cloning. However, she got a bit ahead of herself as she came to the realization that the genome they recovered from Wolverine was horribly mangly damaged, making a pure clone impossible. But as always, where there's a will, there's a way. Sarah does what any winner does in a bad situation, pivot and find a way. So she decided to cut some corners by duplicating the X chromosome, which is the female chromosome because science. Anyway, the Facility was against that idea because they felt she was going to change the strength and abilities of the final weapon itself. But Sarah's a scientist. She gives exactly 0 F's about what the higher-ups think. All she cared about was proving her experiment or creation would work. So she goes behind their backs and on her 23rd attempt, finally creates a viable specimen, hence the name X-23, with the X standing for Weapon X, and if you didn't know that already, you're welcome. Even though she was successful, the Facility was livid with Sarah, but since it was already done, they decided to give it a try with one condition. Xander Rice, who loathes Wolverine entirely because he murdered his father in Weapon X, forces Sarah to be the surrogate mother for X-23. He literally says, you play mommy or your side project doesn't make the night. So for 9 months, she carried the baby, being poked, prodded, and violated, with every move being watched until it was time to give birth. Then after she gave birth, the story jumps forward to when X-23 is around 7 and being trained in physical combat and exposed to abuse to strip away her humanity. Talk about a messed up childhood. Sarah was also given strict orders not to treat X-23 like her child, but as we all know by now, Sarah doesn't listen to orders and spent time reading her Pinocchio in secret. Not long after, Rice began exposing X-23 to radiation in order to activate her mutant abilities. While this does work, it almost killed her. Nevertheless, once her mutant powers emerge, he also decided to lace her claws with adamantium, just like Wolverine. As you may have noticed, she only has 2 claws on each hand, unlike Wolverine who has 3 on each hand, but X-23 also has a claw on each foot. Anyway, when they were applying the adamantium, Rice decided not to use the anesthesia, which even the nurse tells him that's inhumane. But he just turns and whispers in X-23's ear, "This is for my father," and proceeds anyway, officially earning Rice the Douche of the Year award. As for X-23, once she had both her mutant powers and adamantium claws, she quickly became one of the world's best assassins by age 11, and Rice has her use her new skills to murder his employer, Martin Sutter, and his family, except for Sutter's son Henry, all so that Rice could take control of the Facility. When Sarah learned what Rice made X-23 do, she was like, yeah, that's enough, I'm setting X-23 free. But before she had a chance, Rice shows Sarah X-24 through X-50 and says, "You didn't really think we would stop at X-23, did you?" Shocked and appalled, Sarah tells X-23 to destroy the Facility, which of course she does with ease. After this, X-23 heads to meet Sarah, but before his death, Rice had laced Sarah with a trigger scent that would send X-23 into an uncontrollable murderous rage, inadvertently causing her to kill Sarah. Before Sarah dies, however, she reveals to X-23 that she's her mother, and tells her that her real name is Laura. Laura then lays there with her mom saying, "Please don't leave. please don't leave me. It's actually incredibly sad and pulls on the heartstrings quite a bit. At least it did for me. Anyway, after the events of Innocent Lost, which again is her origin story, Laura is captured by Captain America and is interrogated by him and Matt Murdock. They ask her who she is, where she came from, and stuff along those lines. So Sarah basically recounts to them how after her mother's death, she found her way to San Francisco, where she managed to track down her aunt and cousin on her mother's side. She introduced herself as Sarah's daughter, and finally catching a break, they offered to take her in. But this is comics, and there's always a twist. It turns out that her aunt's boyfriend is an agent of the facility, and is instructed to manipulate X-23 into killing her aunt and cousin using the same trigger scent. But when he tried, things don't work out in his favor, and X-23 kills him instead. Facility agents are then sent to storm the house, but X-23 manages to escape, saving both her aunt and cousin. After this incident, X-23 decided to hunt down the man who made her life possible, Wolverine. She ambushes him, which leads to an epic fight between the two of them. She actually gets the better of him and says, "We are both weapons, we have to die." But Wolverine basically says, "If you want to kill me, fine, but I won't let you kill yourself." Of course, in the end, they don't kill each other, and Logan reveals that Sarah had sent him a letter about X-23 before she died. Logan offers to help her, but the conversation was interrupted when Captain America arrived, placing X-23 under arrest. Which brings us full circle to the point where Rogers and Murdock are interrogating her. Despite her murderous behavior in the past, Matt Murdock acknowledges that X-23 is really the victim and has just been used as a pawn her whole life. And while Captain America believes she should face justice, he ultimately lets X-23 go and tells her to go to Logan in order to avoid S.H.I.E.L.D. attempting to exploit and use her as their own weapon. Now, a crap ton of stuff happens with her after this. For example, she becomes a member of the X-Men, Avengers Academy, Thunderbolts, X-Force, and so on. But to avoid rambling for hours, I'm going to skip all the way to when she becomes the new Wolverine, because quite frankly, I'm sure most of you want to hear about that anyway. There's not a whole lot to it. Basically, sometime after the death of Wolverine's storyline, Marvel decided that someone else had to take up the mantle of Wolverine following the Secret Wars event. And who better to do the job than his clone/daughter, X-23. She debuted as such in the all-new Wolverine series written by Tom Taylor with art by David Lopez. And her costume is very similar to Wolverine's astonishing X-Men costume. Her all-new Wolverine series takes place 8 years after the newest Secret Wars event, and shows her living up to Logan's legacy as the new Wolverine. They even give a tip of the hat to Wolverine's first appearance with this page. It's the same layout, background, and dialogue. They just swapped the Wolverine with the new Wolverine. But now, friends, it's time for powers and abilities. As you probably assumed, she has all the same abilities as Wolverine since she's his clone. Although, some of her abilities and strength levels actually exceed his own, which is just nuts. Take her healing factor, for example. Not only does it allow her to heal extremely fast, it even allowed her to regrow limbs in the past. Her healing factor is believed to be better than Wolverine's due to the fact that only her claws are covered in adamantium and not her entire skeleton like Wolverine. She's technically mortal, but because of her amazing healing abilities, she's extremely hard to kill. She also has superhuman senses like smell, vision, hearing, and so on. As for her claws, she only has 2 on each hand, but she makes up for those missing claws on her hands by having 1 on each foot, like I said earlier. So she still has a total of 6 claws. In short, you really don't want to be kicked in the man bits by this girl. It would basically be more of a castration than anything. Anyway, she's also an amazing fighter in both armed and unarmed fighting, making her one of the best assassins in the Marvel Universe. X-23 can also speak several languages, but it's not all crazy healing and having shining claws. She does have a weakness. The facility created a specific chemical called the trigger scent in order to turn her against any target she was unwilling to kill. The trigger scent sends X-23 into a murderous rage in which she can't distinguish friend from foe and just kills anyone in her path. Also, because she doesn't have a full adamantium skeleton, she is more vulnerable to getting her head and limbs chopped off than Logan is. But now that you know how cool of a character she is, you probably want some reading recommendations, and as always, I got you guys covered. You have NYX issue 3, the Innocence Lost storyline, the Target X story, Avengers Academy, and New X-Men Childhood's End volumes 1 through 5. Those are just a few to get you guys started. When you buy a domain name from domain.com, you get the power to influence and control what people find when they search for you online. No domain extension will help you tell your story like a .com or .net domain name. Domain.com is affordable, reliable, and easy to use. The guys at Domain.com gave Variants an awesome offer. Get 15% off Domain.com's already affordable domain names and web hosting when you use the coupon code VARIANT at checkout. So when you think domain names, think Domain.com. First up for Wednesday, March 1st, we have Nightwing Issue 16. Try and keep up as Dick Grayson spans the globe to piece together clues and uncover the mystery of who wants Nightwing dead. Now we have Marvel's Spider-Man Homecoming Prelude Issue 1. Spider-Man's foray into the Marvel Cinematic Universe begins here, with part 1 of the adaptation of Marvel Studios' Captain America Civil War. And finally, we have Batman Issue 18, I Am Bane Part 3. Bane broke the bat before, but it wasn't enough, so now he's gonna break everyone else. Bane is coming, and no one is safe. But that brings another episode of Variant to a close, but if you like what you saw today, be sure to subscribe to our channel, and also hit the little bell so you're notified every time we upload a new video. But as always, remember you can like our Variant Facebook page, keep up with the show and all things comic related. You can also follow Variant on Twitter at Variant Comics, or me on Twitter at Arris_Quinones. But I'll see you guys next week when I talk about all things comics. She also has superhuman senses like smell, vision, hearing, and so on. But like I said earlier, first up for Wednesday, March 1st, we have Nightwing Issue 16. Try and keep up with Dick Grayson.